A year ago, Sky News brought you the story of 3 women who claimed they were mistreated by Greater Manchester Police. Their testimony was chilling. Allegations of humiliation, of improper strip searches, of abuse of power.
I did feel like I was being used as a piece of meat, and that men wouldn't be used in that, that don't get strip searched in that way.
That's how they get you to shut up, because it's scary. It's absolutely terrifying.
There's nothing you can do. Like, they're the police. Do you know what I mean? Who do you go to when the police are doing that to you? Like, they know full well that they're in charge.
Sky's reporting led to Greater Manchester's Mayor Andy Burnham setting up an inquiry chaired by the former Victims Commissioner Dame Vera Baird. A year on from our report, Dame Vera has released her conclusions, and they are damning in the extreme.
The truth is, once you're through those doors, it is police and police and police and no one but police. And so they can do what they want. I have seen all the body-worn video, all the custody video, all the statements, and it is a rare mind that is not a police mind that looks at these and sees, my goodness, you're not treating the public well.
I'm Niall Paterson. Welcome to the Sky News Daily. Just a warning before we begin, given the subject matter, a lot of what follows you may well find upsetting. Jason Farrell is Sky's home editor. It was his reporting that put this story firmly in the national consciousness. Jason, just remind us how we got here, the stories that led to the inquiry.
Yeah, we were talking about 3 women. They had nothing else in common, but they had all been in custody in the same police station and all said that they had been subjected to humiliating strip searches. The way in which they were treated, they say, was unnecessary. It was humiliating. It was traumatizing. One of them in particular had been a victim of domestic abuse and had actually gone to the police station as a victim. And yet, because she lost her temper with the police, she was then arrested and subjected to a strip search. The reason for that particular one was because they thought she was concealing a vape and yet was completely stripped naked and told to open her legs, and just utter humiliation. That led to Andy Burnham saying this has got to be looked into, and he called in Dame Vera Baird, who's the former Victims Commissioner, to do a proper thorough investigation, and then she put the word out, and then other people have come forward to her with similar stories.
As a direct result of your journalism, Jason, I mean, we're going to go through the detail of some of those individual stories in just a second, but sum up for us, if you can, Vera Baird's response to the way in which Greater Manchester Police have been behaving.
Unlawful arrests, unlawful strip searches, demeaning people who have been domestic violence or even sexual assault victims. She says at one point, I quote, "If these officers are examples of the culture in GMP, it seems to be one of exercising power they don't have, as and when they wish, without expecting to be held account for it." She says, without this inquiry, none of these issues would have been held to the light of public scrutiny, because let's remember, all of this happens behind police closed doors. And she says that is a worrying possibility. And the devil of this is in the detail. When you get into the stories, the individual stories of this, I will say I was reading a Stephen King's novel at the time this report came through to me. I put down the Stephen King novel and started reading this report, and it was just as extraordinary, just as compelling. Each individual story, if you read through that report, utterly shocking.
Well, let's start with Danica then. What's her story?
So Danica Stewart was a young woman who had reported a sexual assault against someone else, and then she found herself being arrested outside a police station. She'd gone down to hand over her phone, and then she's handcuffed and she is taken into custody. And it turns out that several months after she's made her allegations and complained about the police not properly looking into the investigation, so made a formal complaint, and she feels this is the reason why it happened, she is arrested under an alleged allegation that she blackmailed this alleged sexual offender. So they're going on that person's word, they bring her in and they strip her, and they then subject her to questioning. Now, Dame Vera Baird looked at this and just said the whole thing is unlawful. It shouldn't have happened.
They were on a power trip. I think she says something like they baited me out because they knew that was the thing that was going to get to me the most, so they'd done it on purpose. I never was supposed to even go in the police station and be arrested, so I think that the whole process of me being arrested and getting me to go to the police station on an interview, it was planned, wasn't it? They knew what they was going to do. I'm not on my own with what they've done, and neither. I know there's another 13 people involved in the review, but there's also another probably good percentage of Manchester who've been through the same thing with the police, because that's how they get you to shut up, because it's scary.
And having been through all of that, to have someone like Vera Baird stand up there and say, you were right, they were wrong, how does that feel?
It feels very overwhelming for her to actually stand there and be the person that she is and be in the position that she's in and say, you're right, they shouldn't have done what they've done to you, and I've done everything to prove that, is something that I'll never forget.
I mean, this individual, Danica, turned from victim to suspect based on almost nothing. What on earth did these police officers think they were doing, and why did they feel like they could act in this particular fashion?
Well, I think that is the real thrusting question in all of this, because should she have even been arrested based on someone who has everything to gain from trying to discredit this young woman who's driving to try and get the police to investigate him? This happens in a number of other cases that have come out in the report. And Dame Vera makes the point that sometimes there are really serious offences that are not being investigated, and yet the people making the claims and the allegations sometimes commit a minor misdemeanour, and then they're arrested, locked up, strip searched. What is going on? Why is this happening? And she does raise the issue that Greater Manchester Police, after going into special measures, had come out the other side on a drive to make more arrests. And perhaps some of this has come about through this drive to arrest people. Or, she says, is it a lack of training? Is it the police officers just don't understand the intricacies of people who are sexual assault victims, domestic violence victims? Is there a lack of empathy as well within these police officers? And is there a culture within these kind of closed environments, which are very male-orientated, she points out, where women are demeaned and subjected to this kind of treatment without accountability? And I think that is a really key thing, because a lot of the people in this report have complained about their treatment and then been told, well, there's nothing to see here. And by God, when this report comes out and you look at what's happened, there's everything to see here.
Remind us of the case of Maria, another person who was strip searched, but this was to recover what police believed to be a concealed vape.
I mean, the detail is really quite surprising and shocking, because she has gone down to the police station as a domestic violence victim. She's trying to get help because her partner's been detained, and she wants to get some money and some keys off him so she can get home. And she's outside the police station for hours, and she makes 14 phone calls to the police. Vera Baird describes those phone calls. She's listened to them. She says they were very bureaucratic, badly handled. She wasn't offered support. She wasn't offered help. They kept fobbing her off. And guess what? She lost her patience with it, and she was a bit rude to the police officers. Then she is arrested on one charge, later arrested for malicious communications, and she is then taken in. And because she's put a vape down her trousers, which has actually fallen out of her trousers in the police yard, they then decide to strip search her to look for this vape.
It sends you back to that point in time where you've been abused and hurt. I did feel like I was being used as a piece of meat, and that men wouldn't be used in that, that don't get strip searched in that way. And it's a lot different for women. It's less dignified, especially if they're asking you to open up your legs, because it's so intimate.
This is a domestic violence victim, and what's more, they have been told that Maria, as she's named in the report, has been the victim of sexual assault as well in previous cases. So you've got a victim of sexual assault who's a recent domestic violence victim who is then stripped naked by the police. It, again, was an unlawful arrest. She should not have been arrested, let alone subjected to a strip search.
It is worth noting, though, Jason, not all of those who complained of this sort of treatment at the hands of GMP were women. Tell me about Mark.
Mark Dove is a case where he was in a family dispute. He was arrested for threats to criminal damage. He says that he was having his life threatened at the time. As the only black person on the scene, felt that it was racist what happened. He tried to complain about it. He wasn't particularly responsive to the police. And when they asked him about his welfare and whether he was feeling suicidal, he didn't answer that either. And at that point, they said, right, well, we need you to take your clothes off. They stripped him. Then they put him in anti-rip garments, but then later accused him of potentially trying to rip them, which is quite unusual because they are anti-rip garments. Took those off him and then left him in the cell, he says, for 8 hours.
Humiliating, degrading. Because every time I press the button to ask them something, you can hear them just laughing through the mics. I was told, when I behave, I can have a blanket. I don't know what that means with a 50-year-old man. How, when you behave in a 8-foot by 8-foot cell with nothing in. It was freezing the cell, so like I said, I was asking them for blankets. They wouldn't give me any. So I had to use the tap, which runs hot water, to basically just keep myself warm. When we got out of there, they sent a policeman in, fully clothed. A woman police officer came to the cell. She took me down naked out of the cell. We got near the booking desk. I looked to my right. There's 4 people in suits. Now, I assumed they were solicitors because they was in suits. I was humiliated. There was even prisoners sat on the benches while I'm stark, absolutely naked, not a sock on, nothing.
Be clear here, a lot of the people, Mark Dove included, have never been charged with anything.
I just wonder whether any of this would have actually emerged without your journalism.
But I think our experience of reporting on this, where we were told these strip searches didn't even happen, there was a very defensive response from GMP to start with. And we're a news organisation. So you can imagine if these young women or men are making complaints to the police, what chance they have of being listened to and actually someone being held accountable for what happens. And I think that is the really fundamental issue that underpins all of this, is the complaint system. Because if there was an open complaint system, I think this would have come out in different ways, but it hasn't. And actually the bravery of these women to confront the police and say, what you did to me was wrong, because a lot of people haven't come forward. And I know that Dame Vera spoke to many more people than she's actually put in the report because they didn't want to be named to the police. Even if they're not named in the report, they have been named to the police. The police know who they are. And a lot of women, and Denika's one of them, says, I think the police, they're going to be my enemy until the day I die. And that's how they feel. They don't feel they trust the police. They feel the police are against them.
You've spoken at length with Dame Vera in the aftermath of her report. Tell me what she's saying about GMP and indeed what needs to happen now.
She describes these stories as horror stories. And she, as I said in the beginning, she says there's a lot of unlawful arrests, a lot of unlawful strip searches. And she's put forward a series of recommendations. And I have to say that the GMP say that they have already implemented some of these recommendations. So, for example, on welfare strip searches, where someone says, we're going to take your clothes off because we think, you might be about to harm yourself, you might be concealing something, that's pretty much going to be banned. That they won't be allowed to do welfare strip searches anymore. What they will have to do instead is put that person under observation and having a lay view of the complaint system, an oversight that is completely independent, looking at some of these complaints. And also she talks about dip sampling of arrests. So actually having someone look at whether the police have lawfully arrested people. And I think she is concerned around overzealousness of arresting people when actually they didn't need to be arrested.
I mean, given the extent to which this has happened in Greater Manchester, I have to wonder if this is happening at other police forces in England, Wales, even back in Scotland.
I think certainly we have spoken to people at other police forces around the country who have said this is exactly what's happened to me. And there are other people in other areas. It may be that Manchester had a particular problem, but it is not unique.
Do you feel then a sense of vindication, having now read Dame Vera's report, that these stories that we managed to get out there into the public domain will lead to some concrete change?
I think they will, and I think it's very satisfying for all the people involved and all the people who have actually come forward that this actually does really lead to real change. There's a wholehearted apology from Greater Manchester Police over this, and the police, let's just remember, they do have a difficult job to do. This is, they're dealing sometimes with very, very difficult situations. That means all the more reason, to give them the tools, to give them the training, to give them the guidance, and to have the oversight as to how they deal with those situations and make sure that they don't get them wrong.
Jason, thank you. We'll be back with a former GMP detective. Stay where you are. Welcome back, and a reminder again that some of what follows you may find distressing. Some of the complaints examined by Dame Vera Beard go back several years, and but for the work of organisations in Manchester, bolstered of course by Jason's reporting, it isn't difficult to imagine that none of this would have made its way into the public domain. Maggie Oliver was a detective with Greater Manchester Police. She now runs the Maggie Oliver Foundation, which has been supporting several of those whose cases Dame Vera examined as part of the inquiry. Maggie, do you recognise that characterisation of Greater Manchester Police as a place where victims were treated as offenders, where unlawful arrest was endemic?
Yeah, listening to Dame Vera in the press conference, it reflects what I have sadly been seeing for about the past 12 years. She was very eloquent. She did a phenomenal job. What I see is unlawful arrests, legitimate complaints, but a complaint system which is completely unfit for purpose. It is police marking their own homework.
But that, I suppose, is the thing that is most concerning about this. A litany of unlawful arrests, bad enough. Using strip search improperly, bad enough. General low-level kind of abuse of people who have come to a police station as a witness rather than a suspect, bad enough. But it's that so many vulnerable women have been treated in this way, and vulnerable women who have previously reported to GMP with cases of physical abuse, sexual abuse, mental abuse.
And it's brutal. And they are powerless to be heard because the people to whom they complain, quite rightly, when they are treated inhumanely, when they are unlawfully arrested, the people who then investigate those complaints are the very people against whom the complaint is being made. And their priority is to protect the organisation, not to uphold the rights of those victims. And sadly, and actually criminally, it is only when we have a national media coverage of these cases that they are taken seriously. But we are dealing with many, many cases identical to these throughout the whole country every single day.
Something I have just been struggling with in this story. Why? Why would so many police officers behave unlawfully, as identified by Dame Vera? More than that, act with seeming impunity, as if they are themselves above the law, rather than the guardians of it. How on earth does someone enter Greater Manchester Police and end up like that?
There is a culture that pervades, and I think that culture is allowed to pervade because there are a small number of bad apples, and because the system, when someone complains, is unfit for purpose, they believe that they are above the law themselves. And sadly, they are, because it is only with a report like this that shines a light into these dark corners. Otherwise, what happens is every individual victim who is treated like this is an isolated case.
I then wonder, given the publication of Vera Baird's report today, Maggie, whether or not vulnerable women in Greater Manchester are more or less likely to approach the police as of this moment with any problem that they encounter.
You have to question whether or not it's safe to approach or challenge the police when they are likely to become a target if they upset, and I quote Dame Vera, if they piss off a custody officer, or they are dealing with somebody who is perhaps out of their depth. We need safeguards in place to ensure that when those things happen, those bad apples are rooted out straight away. Not every victim will get an independent review by Vera Baird. And so there are many, many victims who will not have a voice. They will not be heard. As Dame Vera said, there was a 2-week period that found these cases. And then other victims coming forward were excluded from this review. This is 2 weeks of scrutiny. That is scary.
Maggie, thank you. Greater Manchester Police were put in special measures in December 2020 after an estimated 80,000 crimes were not properly recorded. Since then, under a new Chief Constable, improvements have certainly been made. But Dame Vera Baird's report gives us a snapshot of the force as it is right now, and it looked at just 15 cases. Undoubtedly, there are many, many more. Greater Manchester Police Chief Constable Stephen Watson said this: "The issues raised in Dame Vera's report speak to a period when our custody system was under pressure and not performing to an acceptable standard. It evidences poor systems, structures and incivility, insensitivity, compounded by a lack of routine leadership, scrutiny, and individual examples of low standards, poor behaviour, insensitivity and a lack of care in the face of vulnerability. These issues are of the utmost importance and highlight the need to maintain the highest professional standards. These must reflect our duty and moral obligation to respect and uphold the dignity of all detainees, but with a particular focus on women and girls." The Chief Constable's statement concludes, "We accept the recommendations in this report. We commit to implementing them fully and faithfully with a view to making lasting improvements." That's your lot for this edition of The Daily. We'll see you again tomorrow.